Everyone, welcome to this peer learning session. It's hosted by the Maryland Healthy Heart Learning Collaborative, which is a program of the Maryland Department of Health with funding through the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. And our members, we asked our members, what is it that patients and caregivers who that have experience with heart disease, what are some things that they want to learn or that we should probably share and teach out in these peer learning sessions? And grief and loss was one of the topics. And so this topic was in response to what our members said that community members and their constituents would be interested in. And so, with that said, I'm going to just introduce Walter, and then I'll pass, and then he can take it from here. But Walter Williams is a practicing psychotherapist, life coach, and dedicated advocate for mental health and well-being. And throughout his career, he has facilitated over 50 workshops on mental health and well-being, and has contributed to multiple podcasts and expert panelist conversations. He is a licensed professional counselor with a master's in rehabilitation psychology. He earned both his bachelor's and his master's from the University of Wisconsin-Madison, and he is the principal and founder of Think and Grow. And in 2024 alone, Walter delivered 630 client sessions. That's over 36,000 minutes of time, so over 600 hours. And he facilitated, and in his career, he has facilitated over 50 mental health workshops. So at this time, I'll pass it over to Walter. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Thank you. So happy to be here. I'm gonna share my screen so we can get started. And then I'll get out everybody's way. Let's see. How are we looking? Can you see my screen well? Let me get there.
Yes, you're good.
Okay, good, good, good. Well, welcome everyone. Happy Wednesday. So good that you're here. If you comfortable turning your camera on, you're more than welcome. You will have opportunities to share some things in the chat so that we know you're engaged, but also just making sure that you're learning something that can be applicable in your life, or maybe something that you can help with someone else's. So we're just going to talk about embracing grief with purpose and understanding. Miss Shanta gave me a wonderful intro, so I won't belabor the moment with more information about me. But just a little bit. I am based in Arizona, so I'm not in the Maryland area. So I see y'all representing. Love to hear that. But I have offices in Wisconsin and Alabama, and opening one here in this area. And then what a privilege to serve. My purpose is to help people restructure and reshape how they think, so they can bring attention to how it positively impact their body and uplift their spirit. And that's what I'm hoping to do for you here today in some of our dialogue. Today, we just want to understand grief a little bit. And if you know this, feel free to add some thoughts to the chat, validate maybe what some of what you're hearing, or offer a new perspective. We're going to talk about building some resilience, and then talk about some purpose finding, just transforming loss into a meaningful living for ourselves. If we're looking in the sense of individuals that may have lost due to cardiovascular matters. Personally, just to share a little bit, my mom, my brother, my oldest brother, and my oldest sister have all passed away due to congestive heart failure. This is my mom 2006, my sister 2021, and my brother 2023. All congestive heart failure. So it really shaped. So when Shanta asked me to engage with this dialogue with you, I was really excited because this is something that hit home for me personally. Having those tragic loss over the years of my life, and then having to figure out how do I keep living? How do I keep going? How do I show up? What does that mean for my life? What does that mean for my children? And all of that good stuff. So I'm hoping to share some of that with you here today. But just to show harmony in this space, that we all have a story, and we all have something or somebody we know is being impacted by it in one way or another. So with that, and Shanta already did this coming in. Just as we in this space, just want to invite you to bring loved ones to mind, invite their energy into this space, invite their spirit into this space, those who may not be in the land of the living. If you're someone who's living with cardiovascular concerns and matters, inviting your full self to be present in this moment. Because I think the energy we give, the energy we begin to share amongst each other can be felt. I am someone, even in a virtual space, I could pick up on different energies and whatnot. So I just want us to bring that to mind as we have this dialogue today, okay? So grief, what is grief? Grief is universal. It's something that we all experience, we all endure, we all have to encounter in some form of fashion. Um, a lot of times I think people associate grief with just death in itself, but it's something that goes beyond death. We can have grief following a diagnosis, maybe finding out that we have some cardiovascular matters going on in our body. It could be a lifestyle change, maybe transition from a job, maybe deciding to quit your full-time job and be an entrepreneur, like something I did. It can be the loss of independence, not being able to care for yourself, maybe having to rely on a loved one to tend to your needs. And that transition is hard. As you may know, any change, any transition is difficult, but I don't think we often view it in the form of grief. I'm thinking back to before I established my practice, I was a high school counselor for a number of years. And I was at a point where I'm ready to step out and do my own thing, but it was really hard for me to detach from that role because I had made a commitment to support my students. And being a Black man, I was working in a predominantly white high school. So if you're somebody with an experience like that, you know the pressure you feel to want to be there for your Black students, particularly, and for your students of color, because representation matters, right? So when I was preparing to disconnect and detach from that, it was really hard. And my therapist at the time was helping me to understand that it was grief that I was experiencing because I feel like I was abandoning my students and my team. I feel like I was letting them down. In reality, I was just trying to put my family in a better position to have more freedom and flexibility in my time and be able to work and do opportunities like these more. But it was grief that I was experiencing. And when she was able to bring that to my attention, in that moment, I was able to sit with that and work with that. So grief can come in many forms of fashion, and it can be subtle, and it can be something that's insurmountable. And we'll talk about that a little bit more. Grief, it can be a lifetime. It could be a lifetime. I mentioned, I lost my mom in 2006 to cardiovascular, to congestive heart failure, and to this day, I still grieve. The pressure isn't as heavy as it was then, because of time. However, there are moments where I just sit and just think and miss her and want to be embraced and wonder how she would respond to my son and what he's doing. So it become moments of grief that come up for me. Yet it's something that don't sit for an extended period of time, if that makes sense. We also express grief differently. You have folks who will cry. You have some folks who get angry. You have folks who cope in unhealthy ways, maybe drinking, substance, partying like crazy, whatever the case. And I have nothing against those things, but how we begin to express ourselves when we grieve matters and is very important because we may inadvertently or unintentionally hurt someone out of our pain. We may hurt someone out of the grief we're experiencing. So how we express it and how we choose to express it really matters. And we'll talk about that a little bit more later as well. Um, I do believe there's a mind-heart connection when it comes to grief. Um, what we think about, what's on our mind, shows up in our body in some form of fashion. In our world of clinical, we label stress as a silent killer. So when we are overthinking, when we are ruminating, when we are fixated on something, it can start to show up in our body. And if you're someone who speak in front of crowds or lead teams, you may start to feel if you overthink in your head, you might find yourself getting a little jittery. Your knees may buckle or your heart may beat fast, right? A lot of times what's on our mind shows up in our body. So it becomes important that we begin to recognize what it is that we're thinking about, what it is that we meditate on, that we ruminate on, that we're processing, and noticing how it shows up in our body and where in our body it shows up. For me, when I'm stressed, my shoulders go like this. You'll think I got shoulder pads in, right? You be like, man, bring your shoulders down from your ears. But I notice it, they'll start to creep up and I have to, in the moment, check myself like, lower your shoulders, Walter, right? You may not hear me say that, but in my head, I'm like, relax, relax, so that I can keep my mind, present and my body in alignment with that. So all to say, grief is universal. I don't think it looks one way. I don't think it sounds one way. It's something that looks different, feels different for us all. But I think it is important that we begin to recognize it for what it is, because once we can recognize and identify it, we can then do some things about it. Um, and if you have thoughts or questions, feel free to put them in the chat as I'm talking, or if you agree or even disagree with anything. I'm gonna just keep rolling. I can't see the chat or everybody because I'm in present mode, but you're welcome to engage as much as possible. The grief experience, as I was mentioning, we all experience grief in a different way. What's in front of you here is what we call the stages of grief: the denial, the anger, the bargaining, the depression, the acceptance. And the fact of the matter is, none of us are ever just in one stage. It's often that we can jump from stage to stage, so uh, we can be in a denial stage a lot of times when we lose a loved one. Um, it's hard to believe. To this day, my sister, she transitioned in 2021. Sometimes I'm still like, I can't believe she's gone. Like I just can't believe it. Like, because I haven't spoken to her. I feel like I haven't spoken to her in a long time. So I find myself creeping into that denial stage of just disbelief. And then I'm back into the acceptance stage of being mindful of what it is, right? So many of you may experience going through some of this, or know individuals who have been in that denial stage of that initial shock, that disbelief. And it may not just be in regards to losing someone to death. It could be an adjustment in your life. It can be an adaptation you have to make, a transition you have to make, that can leave us in disbelief, like of, I just can't believe this happened to me, and it can lead us to asking those questions. Why me? Why have I been burdened with this? And sometimes that can lead to some frustration, anger, where we're mad or upset at the fact of life is happening. Maybe our loved one is transition. Um, Anger isn't always a bad thing. You would often hear me say it's what we do with these feelings and these ideas is what matters. Because anger can also help us to be motivated. It can protect us as well in certain situations. But if we're not careful with grief, sometimes that hurt that we're feeling from the loss of someone or for the transition that's happening in our life, we can project it onto someone else. Now we're dealing with two situations where we may have, be transitioning from one and causing harm in another. And now we're stuck in the middle, which now compounds that grief, if you will. But it's okay if you feel that anger, because it's a natural feeling, it's a natural response to have, but it's what we do with it. Bargaining, that's that way of trying to gain control. I used to hear folks say growing up, Lord, take me instead, or if I could trade places with this person, that I would. It is almost like a negotiation of wanting to control the situation better or change the outcome. Yet the reality is that we can only control what we can control. And sometimes folks get stuck in this stage, but not often I see folks stuck in the bargaining stage. I usually see a lot of the denial, the anger, depression. But we get there. We get there, and I find myself thinking about that often, of what would happen if I would have did this instead, or how would this have happened had I said this? Um, so that bargaining stage becomes another pivotal point in this process. Depression, that's that deep sadness when we have to face the reality of what it is that's in front of us. I often challenge my clients to not identify as being depressed, but to feel depressed. I'm of the belief that you know who you are and what you're experiencing, what you're feeling are different. Because if I take on the identity or the clothes of I'm depressed, sometimes I can bathe in that, and that becomes what oozes out of me. Because there is a difference between just feeling depressed, and we all feel a sense of depression. We all feel a sense of sadness. We experience a sense of happiness, joy. Is how long we stay in that state that matters. And as a therapist, that's what I'm looking for when I'm working with clients who are experiencing grief. Of okay, you feel it as how long have we been there? And I also challenge folks to think about how long do you choose to stay there, right? Because sometimes folks like enjoy wallowing in what they're in and don't want to get out of it. So I invite my clients, and I invite you here today as well, just to think about, when I am feeling down, just giving yourself permission to feel that way and not be quick to move, because sometimes we may cause harm moving so fast. But the key is not to get stuck, right? So can you give yourself a time limit? All right, I'm gonna give myself 36 hours to feel this, to go through my process. Then I'm gonna work my way back into getting a routine and moving with my day. It does a dual approach where it acknowledges where you are, but also doesn't keep you where you are and gives you some light at the end of the tunnel of what you may be experiencing. That acceptance, that's just finding new balance and finding meaning. And I think I see a hand going up. Miss
Yes,
Cynthia.
Cynthia.
Go
Sure.
ahead. I didn't want to interrupt you. I didn't want to interrupt, but I have to say, I was gonna put it in the chat, but it's just so important. You're so
Please.
right. You're so true. It's so true. Being a professional myself, and then going through
Mm,
familial heart disease
mhm.
is an interesting fact because you're always the caregiver to others, and then all of a sudden you have to allow yourself grace.
Absolutely.
And we are not prepared to do that as healthcare providers usually. Usually we're the ones on the other side of the bed. But when you're on in that bed, it takes on a different story. But you're right about the grief. I had to allow myself to grieve. So, and once I started, it's only been a year. I had my chest open. I'm open to this because I also support other people going through it now, because there's a lot of things we don't know, especially women of
Mm,
color with
mm.
heart disease. So the bottom line to it is that everything you're saying is so true, but it's important to go through that grieving process of loss. And again, we don't think of it as okay, loss of me being, I'm the type A person, so I'm used to just getting it done, work until it's done. And I had, when you have something like you know, surgery, heart surgery, then all of a sudden it's like I can't even, I need help. I'm
Absolutely.
learning how to ask for help, but I'm gonna let you go on. I'm sorry. I
No,
had
no. Yes, you're perfectly fine. Thank you for sharing that perspective. Because it's so real. We have to give ourselves permission to sit, and not be quick to run. And being providers, we take pride in aiding and assisting and rescuing, and we put our cape on and run in the fire, and we
Mhm,
got the rest later. So
mhm.
I completely understand where you're coming from with that. Thank you for sharing. And in that into the acceptance, that's um accepting what is, I'm realizing the place that you're in. And even hearing you, Miss Cynthia, of, once having your chest open and realizing that, oh, I'm still here. I'm still kicking. That heart's still pumping. I'm still having impact. I'm still having influence. I'm still showing up. It helps us to begin to accept where we are, or to embrace what is, and not necessarily get fixated on what was or what wasn't. And a lot of times, we can get stuck in that state. That's where some of that depression, that deeper depression, can kick in, where we get stuck in things and situation that has already passed. And my question is, what do you remain bound to? That's no longer serving you. What experiences, what people, you know, what part of you may have transitioned or have died when loved ones have? Um, what are some things that you may have needed to put to rest, from those situations that's no longer serving you? Um, what do you what do you lose by letting go of some of those things, right? Those are ways we start to arrive to a state of acceptance. And this not in here, but from there, it helps us to graduate to what I'm learning now, in my work and my studies, this place of allowance. Allowance, it puts us in a position where we have no attachment, no emotional attachment, and we just let things play out as it is, because we start to realize that this is just a part of life, and this body that I have wasn't mine to keep and to stay with anyways. So once I began to realize that I'm just a spirit that's passing through this realm, it allowed us to arrive to that state of allowance and to continue to move forth in our journey and in our healing. But I'm gonna keep going because I don't want to get too deep in that. Grief in your heart. There's physical impacts that happens when you're grieving. Sometimes you may experience some high blood pressure. And I promise I'm not just trying to make this about me, but I can only relate to my story. I think about my grandmother when we got the news that my mom had transitioned, and I watched her take a big breath, and I thought I was going to lose my grandmother that day, and I literally watched her body, her blood pressure shoot up and almost, put her in a state of panic, and in a anxiety attack, is what we would call it. So sometimes when we experience a grief and it hit us so fast, we may have a physical reaction to it. Our blood may begin to increase. Our heart may begin to beat fast. We may begin to experience other illnesses that we didn't know can happen if we're becoming so fixated or hit by grief on a major level. Um, and sometimes, if we're not careful, it can worsen over time, which leads to that broken heart syndrome. And that's that acute emotional stress that's constantly there, where it can mimic a heart attack symptoms, but not necessarily with blocked arteries. My sister, um, I did her eulogy after she transitioned, and that's what I talked about at her eulogy: dying of a broken heart. she was diagnosed with congestive heart failure, but she grieved so heavily around the time, the anniversary when my mom passed. Her drinking will increase, her depression will set in. And believe it or not, she actually transitioned on the same day my mom transitioned back in 2006. I'm of the belief that mom came and got her and said, "Hey, I you can't keep putting yourself through this, so come on with me," right? That's how I've been able to conceptualize that from my acceptance stage and my now allowance stage. But that broken heart syndrome is real. It's real, and if we're not careful, we could begin to mimic the very thing that our loved ones may have transitioned for, or it may be something that we bring upon ourselves if we're not able to get it out and talk about it and process it in a way. Yeah. So just think about that. Think about that. You may know loved ones who are just struggling to get over a tough time or the loss of someone. Um, you may be struggling to get over some news that you may have found out about a loved one or even with yourself. And my question is, how do you get the ground back under you? How do you um, find some alignment for yourself for where you are? Our self-care can be disrupted during grief. We can get out our routines. We may neglect our eating, our exercise. We may not want to be engaged with others as much as we used to. So sometimes grief can make us want to withdraw, and that's a part of that depression stage we talk about when we just want to withdraw, we want to isolate. And I'm not saying anything wrong with that, because sometimes you need a moment to yourself. Sometimes you need to just, hey, let me feel, let me work through this, because I know there's more on the other side. But being able to keep that, and we'll talk a little bit more about keeping a routine as best you can as you're experiencing grief, because it keeps a sense of normalcy in our day to day. This just goes on to build on what I was just talking about in the previous slide. Some emotional signs that we may be experiencing grief. This persistent sadness, easily irritable, this guilt, regret, shame that we may carry, this numbness to just not feel. I have a client now who's going through some grief, who his nephew recently transitioned, and he's just flat. He's just flat. And that becomes a concern, because when you're flat and not expressing or displaying any level of emotion, it's hard to read into that. It's hard to poke at that. And he's in a good place now, thankfully. But that's something, as a provider, that we have to assess and listen for and watch for. Because as a human, we're going to have a reaction to the things that's in front of us. And if we don't, to me, that raises my antenna, personally. But those are emotional signs that a person is grieving heavy. And that was something I used to recognize with my sister. I knew at a certain time in the calendar, her mood just started to decrease, her drinking began to increase. So I knew that it was time for me to go into a different mode with her to support her, because it just got real. It just got real. Physical signs, just being fatigued, always exhausted, maybe sleeping too much, maybe not sleeping enough, not wanting to eat, not wanting, maybe eating too much can be another sign. I think sometimes people lose their appetite. Sometimes people will eat to cope, to try to fill a void, right? And end up impacting their health in an unhealthy way. Chest tightness, where we're not allowing our bodies to get the full oxygen that it needs, or because we ruminate on something and it's starting to show up in our body. Behavior changes, you heard me mention, some social withdrawal, restlessness, forgetfulness, seeking distractions. I can't tell you how many times this client I'm working with now, his drinking increase, his smoking increase, because he's trying to distract himself from the reality of what it is. But it's really getting him further and further and further away from what he really want to focus on and need to focus on. So the objective is now, how do we get you back to center, right? How do we get you back on your path? It doesn't minimize what you're going through, what you're experiencing, but how do we get you back to center? Because if you at the center and you're managing you can manage these things as they come your way. That I call that the inside out approach. And a lot of times I think, as Miss Cynthia saying, as providers, we could be on the outside in trying to fix and work and help everybody. But when we take care of ourselves, when we learn to say no, when we learn to set boundaries, when we let people make mistakes, and I feel like we have to rescue them from their mistakes all the time, we realize that it gives us a little bit more energy to carry on and to handle the things that we need to handle. Hope all this making sense. If I'm moving too fast or too slow, let me know. Am I good, Ms. Jackson? I can't see nobody on my
You
end.
are you are really you're doing great, and I'm learning a lot. In the chat, we do not have any comments. I would just like to add that I appreciate what you said about anger and depression, and it's not who you're not an angry person, you're feeling angry, you're feeling depressed, and but just the way, and not necessarily looking at anger as a negative perspective as well, because it can be a protective factor, or it can even be a motivational factor as well.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. Yeah, and that's something I work with men on, men who batters or have been victims of it. Because, as men, sex and anger be the ways we express ourselves. And, there's a lot of negative connotation around that, but that's a workshop for another day.
Okay,
Thank you for
perfect.
sharing it. And if anybody else have thoughts, please put it in the chat. I'm gonna keep us rolling. Because we're doing good on time. Let's keep going. Uh, Building emotional resilience. When we looking at building emotional resilience for ourselves, here are just some things that comes to mind for me, that I think helps us to continue on our journey. The self-compassion, building connections. So being in spaces like these, mindfulness, routine, self-compassion I view as, being giving is what you will give a friend, it's what you will give a loved one. Sometimes you give people a pass, you give them grace. But I think sometimes we can be very cruel to ourselves and be very hard on ourselves and cruel to ourselves when we may drop the ball, we may not feel like it, when we may just need some extra sleep, when we may step out of bounds and have to reset. I think, as we guilt, resentment, regret. Sometimes, people carry these feelings from experiences they may have had or something they may have said in a previous time. I have a client who lost his dad, and he has a lot of regret, because the last conversation they had wasn't pleasant. Then he transitioned. So now he's stuck, never being able to bring closure and to repair that, and he's hard on himself. And what we're working on now is how do you become more gentle with yourself so that you can come to one with yourself and begin to let that resentment and that regret go, because there's nothing we can do about it at this point in time. But having that self-compassion becomes ever more important. But it's also acknowledging your suffering or acknowledging what it is that you're going through. Not being quick to just say, "Oh, it is what it is" on that one, but giving yourself what you may need, which means giving yourself permission, saying that it's okay to cry, it's okay to feel, it's okay to be sad, and all of that is fine, because if you weren't, I don't think we'll be considered. I don't know if you will be in this space, in that regard. Connection goes a long way. Being able to share your journey, discussing grief is not always the easy thing to do. It took me a long time to be able to talk about a lot of the grief that I've experienced in my life. And quite frankly, the more I talked about it, the more empowered I felt. Because it was like it was just I was purging and it was oozing out of me because I've kept it in for so long. And miraculously, me sharing my story, me sharing my journey, help others carry on theirs. So give people perspective. So um, your pain may be the push someone needs to get through their end, or your pain, turn it into a purposeful message could be the thing that helps someone else repair a relationship with a loved one so that they don't have regret or resentment. So having connection matters and it's very important. Mindfulness, just staying present with our emotion. So that's just being aware. And in that, being aware of our emotions, being aware of our thoughts, but not giving a judgment. You may hear people who say, "I don't know why I thought that, I was so stupid," or "I don't know why I'm feeling that way, that's so dumb." That's us attaching an emotion to what we experience and what we may be feeling in that moment. But sometimes I just feel this way and I just feel this way. Attaching nothing to it allows it to just be, allows it to just exist. Kind of like if you sit on your porch and you're watching the trees blow and the flowers bloom. You're just observing it. You don't have any emotion with it. You're just observing it and taking it in. It may put you in a state of gratitude. Of, wow, look at the creator, look at the creation. Wow, look at life around me. It may put you in a state of awareness and of gratitude like that. But you're present. And that's what we're getting at with mindfulness. It's about being present. It's about being aware with yourself and being willing to sit with yourself in that. Maintaining a routine. I'm someone who my wife and family give me a hard time because I'm like, I'm up, at a certain time. I got my rhythm, I got my routine. Every Tuesday we do Taco Tuesday. So all my neighbors, they say, up, it must be 7:30 because Walter getting quiet. It must be time to go. Because they know that my routine matters. Because I function at a peak when I have structure, when I have routine, and that's me setting my boundaries. Right. When we experiencing grief, I think it's important that we continue to try to maintain a level of routine because it keeps a sense of normalcy. Um, when I learned that my brother had transitioned, though he was diagnosed with congestive heart failure, what took him was an overdose, and I was preparing to go to the gym anyways, but because like I was just so filled with emotion, I'm like I got to hit the gym because all of those feelings that came up needed to come out. And I'm like, I need to go somewhere to express it. And thankfully, I already had that a part of my routine. I think years ago I would have been like, no, forget everything, blah, blah, blah. But I'm like, no, let me still lean into this because this is why I put this system in place for moments like these when I need to express myself. And I don't want to talk about it. I can't talk about it. I just gotta feel it. And I gotta feel. And sometimes we just gotta feel our way through situations. Because words don't do justice. Words may not do justice. And usually when someone transition, we say, hey, I'm lost for words, or I'm sorry, or I don't know what to say. Because sometimes words just don't do justice for how we may be feeling. But keeping a routine sometimes allows us to feel our way through the moment and feel our way through these experiences that we're having. And it may not feel like, we're at our best self doing that, but subconsciously you keeping yourself in a stable place, and you're allowing yourself to be mindful and to feel again without going too far left or going too far right. Hopefully that makes sense. I saw something pop in the chat. Yes, Miss Shanta.
Yes, so Cynthia, she says, what I found is sharing my journey with others helps them see they are normal. I learned to speak my truth, or I have learned to speak my truth. And if Cynthia, if you want to add anything to that, or if anyone else has anything to say, please share.
This is Cynthia, I just, I'm sorry, I'm talking a lot.
No,
But
this is the place to do so.
I basically have learned that if you have, I give of myself for what I went through in my journey. And when I do this, I learned that people innately kind of come to you. And again, there's times when I refer away from me if I see it's a problem, but a problem greater than I can handle. But I do see that it's extremely important that you do share your journey as you're sharing your journeys of loss, because people are human and we pick up on that humanity. So the other thing is, the one thing this has taught me is to speak my truth.
I love that.
So if I don't feel good or I don't feel like doing something, I'm gonna tell my sister I don't feel like doing it, and getting rid of what I consider friendships or acquaintances that maybe before I would look at as, oh, I'm gonna go out with them, even though I don't want to go out, but I'm gonna go out. Now it's like, I don't feel like going out today. I'm okay. I'm fine. And routine health, working out every day is my thing.
I love
And my
that.
family knows, don't bother her between 9 and 11 because that is my thing. I gave so much of myself as a nurse that I find didn't put much in that vessel back. So that's what I found has helped me. And only other thing I have to say, and then I'll shut up, is I took care of my mother, and she passed 2 years ago. And talking about that heart, I had told my husband, I feel like my heart is actually breaking. I had never felt that before. So yeah, when you talk about that, it does happen because I literally felt that feeling of my heart breaking. And needless to say, I ended up with heart surgery, but that's okay. I'm on the mend. But yeah, so good. Everything you're saying, I'm glad yeah, that's good. Good to hear this.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
And then we have a comment in the chat as well. So thank you both, Walter and Cynthia, Miss Cynthia, for sharing. Alvin says that sharing really helps sometimes as well. He's acknowledging that.
Yeah.
And while we're speaking of resilience, just for the audience members, could you explain what resilience? I understand, well, or I can add to it about resilience if you don't mind. Okay.
Please.
So when we speak about resilience, resilience is that we go through something, right? And essentially, it's our ability to bounce back. So I just wanted to kind of share that definition, and of course, these are the things that Walter shared that we can do to bounce back. But resilience, just in case folks didn't know on the call, I just wanted to share that kind of like that definition. Like we go through something, and it's our ability to process, like you said, accept, to be mindful, be compassionate, experience whatever it is that we're experiencing, but then we bounce back.
Absolutely. Yeah, thank you. Thank you for sharing that. Uh, and I can imagine if we all just take a moment and think about our life for a second, we can identify moments of resiliency. Uh, and we may not be able to recognize it in a moment when we're in something, but think about the hardest thing you've gone through, at any stage in your life, yet you're still here. You're still taking care of yourself. You're still figuring it out. You're still taking care of your responsibilities. You've still raised your family, all of those things. So we all have that resiliency trait in us. It's about massaging it and working it and reminding ourselves of it. You were bringing up some good stuff, and I appreciate you sharing. You talked about speaking your truth. And it says, the truth shall set you free. And when we are operating from our truth, it leaves no attachment to us. Because if I'm truthful and honest, like what else you want from me? It's the lies, or it's the I'm gonna go, but I really don't want to go, that weighs on us, because now it keeps us attached, right? When we're not being truthful. So I love that you in a space where you can speak your truth and stand on it. And I'm hearing you have set some great boundaries, where people respect your boundaries. They know not to bother you between this time and this time, which means you send a very clear message of, hey, this mine, this for me, this not for nobody else. And I'm gonna teach you how to respect the space that I created for myself by asking you not to bother me, or by ignoring your call, or whatever the case may be. So you're giving some really good information, Miss Cynthia. Thank you for that. And please continue to add to the chat as necessary. I love the discussion we're having here.
Yes, Serena says that resilience is showing up even though when you are not able to show up for yourself.
Mm, yes,
So
yes.
showing up even when you are not able to show up for yourself. Yes.
We call that a sacrifice. Yeah. And if we're operating from the principle of love, love is in the sacrifice. So when you're able to show up tired, exhausted, and hold space for individuals. If you're providers, if you're a caregiver, oh man, that's wonderful. And I think that's how we stay blessed. Now, I think it's a healthy amount of which we need to sacrifice, so we don't burn out, overcommit, and then we cause harm on the other end. But yes, that sacrifice, I love that. Thank you. Heart center and coping. So here's just some ideas. I'd imagine I want to assume that some of you may be aware of it. And if you're not, just some strategies to consider, and we can do a long laundry list. But here's just some things that I just want to invite you to think about, as you are living with grief, as you may be experiencing it, as you may know someone who's going through it. If you could just take an inhale, a nice deep inhale, a nice exhale. My first question is, how much did you pay for that? Right? And two, realizing that we connected to a source that's endless for us to be able to breathe and for us to be able to control something that just comes effortlessly. Yet when we become more intentional with our breath work, it helps us to manage our nervous system, our parasympathetic nerves. And athletes preach to this. If you're someone who work out, once you get to a certain rhythm and you're able to manage your breath, your nervous system starts to even out over time. Um, that's why I enjoy working out in the mornings, because it shocks my nervous system. It gets me at a mellow state, and I'm able to engage with my clients, and any stress that comes to me throughout the day, I'm able to manage it because I've already been able to have that moment to work on my breath to start my day. But deep breathing just activate that nervous system. It allow us to come back to a regulated state. A lot of times, if we're anxious, if we're depressed, if we're moving too fast, we can have what we call shallow breathing, where we just breathing enough to stay alive. And if you're someone who operates from that, and I used to be that way, I want to invite you, if you're open to it, in the mornings when you wake up, just take 3 to 5 deep breaths, just so you can connect with it and you can feel it. And it also offers a moment of gratitude to say, I'm just thankful I got breath in my body. I'm just thankful that I'm able to get up and do what it is that I need to do to support myself and to support my family. With stress, it reduces the strain on the heart. You heard me say earlier, stress is a silent killer. But the one source that we have, this breath, can be the one of the things that helps us to manage the stress and to keep our bodies in alignment. So if you're somebody who's not familiar with breath work, I want to invite you to just do a little research, or connect with Shanta and I on the back end, and we'll be happy to give you more insight on it because we don't have a lot of time to go into it today. It's just a powerful resource that we have that I don't think we take advantage of. And I think sometimes we can take it for granted, until it's too late, or until we're up against something and we're forced to. Gentle movement, and we talked about this a little bit already. Walking, swimming, yoga, all of those things helps us to just improve our mood and our heart health. When I was in college, I'll dilly dab with the gym. Usually it's like, spring break's coming up, so I'm gonna hit the gym so I can go to somebody beach and take my shirt off. And I'll find myself working hard up into it. I'm trying to chase a result, but I wasn't consistent with the gym, right? Then after spring break, I'm like, it's over with. And I went back to my baseline, my business as usual. But what I had to do, and what I want to invite you all to consider is ask yourself why. Like, why is your health important? Not necessarily the results you're trying to achieve, right? Dropping weight, looking good in a shirt. Those are the results. That's the outcome. But why is it that it's important that you show up for your health every day? And if you think about health as the table, right? If you think about a table with 4 legs, our health is a table we set. And if we don't have stable legs for the many things that's going to sit on top of that table, if that table collapses, everything on that table falls. And I believe our health is the table we set to carry the burdens of life, to be able to show up for others, to be able to show up for ourselves, to be able to smile when nothing's to smile about. It's that resilience we talking about there, right? For me, my why is to outlive my parents. My dad died of a tragic event, tragic accident. But you heard me say my mom, my brother, my sister, my grandmother also had a heart condition, but she was able to catch it before it's too late. So I'm aware that, okay, maybe this thing is hereditary. Maybe there's something in my genes. So what is it that I can control to better my health now? Because I don't know what tomorrow holds, and I don't know what may be coming down the line. So it just challenged me to shift my perspective on my health. So my why for my health is to outlive my parents and to beat cardiovascular disease. So that's what gets me to show up every day. And it helps me to, and from your why, my question is, who must you be to honor that why? Or in other words, what characteristics, what traits must you have? Discipline, integrity, compassion, maybe hard work. Who must you be to operate from that why? The how is the process, right? That's hitting the gym, that's going for a walk, that's swimming. You take a bottle, you do this enough, your arm gonna get tired. Right? So the how, when you know your why, the how reveal itself, and the what, that's the outcome, right? That's the reduced stress. That's getting on the scale and being like, yeah, that's a good number right there, right? That's being able to fit a pair of jeans or get in a dress you may have wanted to for some time, and now you can, right? If we chase our why, the results always will reveal itself, but I won't get into that. Expressive activities, so journaling, art, music helps, singing, dancing, all are ways to express ourselves. We are human beings, but we're full of energy. We're full of energy. And sometimes that movement can cultivate some energy and some rhythm. If any of you all are churchgoers, if you ever been in a church and they say the Holy Spirit is in here, it ain't nothing you see, it's something you feel, right? It's an energy that's in the place. Or if you at a concert, or if maybe playing an instrument, it's something you start to feel. And it's a way to express ourselves. As someone who live with grief on a daily basis, it's important that I have those expressive activities. And I just want to invite you to consider, what outlet you may want to consider, for you to be able to heal. And maybe talking to someone, and maybe counseling. It may be in spaces like these. Did I have a comment somewhere? I think I heard somebody.
Yes, and so Alvin, as it relates to gentle movement, he says, I vouch for yoga. It helps also to reduce stress and improves your mindfulness. And when you're ready, we do have a question as well.
Please, I'll take it.
Okay. And so Serena wants to know, how do you cope with a passing client and still show up for your other clients?
That's a really good question. Ah, I actually experienced that as a high school counselor with one of my students he came to see me every day who transitioned, yet I had to show up. Um, I gave wow, I didn't know I would get a question like this, and it took me right back to that moment. What I did and what I'm mindful of is one, I just take a step back from me, to check my blind spots. You know, how am I feeling? Why am I feeling this way? I'm being able to just to sit with those emotions and to grieve the loss, um, because it hurts, and it's sad. Recognizing that you still have many hundreds of people or whomever count on you to show up for them. So one, I think, is just taking a step back for oneself to say, let me get my bearings in order, let me get my house in order, because I can't pour from an empty vessel. So with that, being able to take a step back and think about what do I need to just carry on a little bit. I may not be 100% myself, and I may not be able to give my full self, but what can I do to fill my cup to get me back to a stable place to be able to show up? So just taking that step back, I think, becomes important, and doing the things that you need to do to get your energy back where it is. The gym, dancing, travel, journaling, crying, sing, whatever that is for you. And I think in that moment, being honest with other clients, and owning it to say, hey, I'm going through something right now because I just lost a client or I just lost such and such. So my energy may be off, but I'm here and I'm present with you. So what can we talk about today, or whatever the case may be? I think owning it and acknowledge it. One, I think it gives clients permission to not hide or run away from how they may be feeling and what they may be experiencing. Two, I think it shows the human in us. I think sometimes clients can think we are superhuman and that we don't have things that we're going through and experiencing. But I think it helps to bring some harmony and some normalcy to life, if you will.
What do you think about maybe taking a break? Like sometimes to kind of like stepping back and taking some time for yourself to process.
Absolutely. Yep. And that's what I was getting at on the front end of it. Just taking a step back, disconnecting and just saying, hey, I need a moment. I mean, that's what happened, when I got the news well, I didn't get the news that my sister transitioned. I'm the one who found her body. And I had a caseload of folks to see that week. But I knew I wasn't going to be able to show up for them in the way I needed to. So I had to have my assistant just tell everyone I have a personal matter. I'll follow up in a couple of weeks and we'll keep them updated. And no love was lost. Again, it was just the reality of the situation at that moment. But it allowed me to take care of business, feel my feels, go through the process, and come back still not 100%, but in a place where I'm able to engage and hold space for other people and what they're experiencing. Yeah, big time. Great question. Really good question. Hopefully that answered your question. Okay. I take it as it, and if it didn't, we could follow up. We're talking a little bit about shared experiences and the power of sharing story. And Alvin, I heard you say it's helpful, and I'll be inviting you here to share yours to the extent that you're comfortable. Support groups is a way that we can have a shared experience. Sometimes it could be like, man, I don't want to be talking about my business in front of people. They ain't gonna get it, or it may be one of those. But a support group is just a place where you can dump. You can normalize the experiences you may be going through. You can listen, even if you're someone who don't like to speak much. Sometimes just listening to other people's stories and what they're going through on how they overcome and what strategies they're using can be something that can be applicable to you in your life. So shared support groups helps us to connect with others who just understand our journey, and where we can share wisdom and not feel like it's isolating because sometimes it can feel like it's just me. Like, am I the only one going through this? Am I the only one thinking this way or feeling this way? So being able to have folks to who can hold a mirror up or even be a window to say, I feel with you or I feel for you. And here's how I've been able to, or here's some suggestions, or here's some resources, right? It helps us to realize that we don't have to go through these things by ourselves, that we can certainly be in a space to do so. Professional support always helps. My bias, being a therapist, being a life coach, I can't tell you how much work I do with grief in so many different capacities. And even in my work, I'm learning more and more how grief is showing up for people. And it's not just related to the loss of a loved one. It's a breakup. It's a transition to a new job. It's leaving your state and moving to a different state, having kids, believe it or not, all of those things. But being able to hold space and work with a professional who can help navigate and process complex emotions. I know sometimes, we may not be quick to share with others, but if we can't find a safe place where we can process and unpack and have someone who can hold space for us authentically, genuinely, it just helps us to move along that journey. Storytelling, sharing your stories and hearing others' experiences as we're doing here today becomes so impactful. I'm just inspired by listening to those who shared today, and it's motivating me to just keep carrying on. But with that, I want to belabor the moment. We do have two individuals. I know Alvin is one, and the other is John. I don't know if he's been able to join us, who volunteered to just share their experience, share some insight, share some wisdom on their journey of grief and how it's showing up for them, how they're living with it, how they're navigating it. So I'll pause and pass the mic over to Alvin if you're ready.
You want to stop sharing your screen temporarily?
Sure, I can do that. Yeah, look, I can see people. Well, I can see names now. Mr. Alvin, you there with us? He may have stepped away. I know it's dinner time. May smell some dinner rolls or something. You gotta go get a piece. And I don't see John over here.
No, John wasn't able to join us today.
Okay. I see a thumbs up. Tell me more.
Yeah, just appreciate you hosting this, Walter.
Sure.
Yeah, I'm coming from what's it called? I'm coming from MDH. I work with, yeah, Shanta has definitely been the one coordinating this stuff, and we're just providing, back end support.
For sure. Right on. But thank you. Thanks for inviting your voice into the space. Pleasure to serve.
Okay. And you can go, if you'd like to, you can reshare your screen, but you were asking Serena if you had answered her question, and she said that you did answer her question, and thank you.
Right on then, Serena. Let's go. While we waiting on Alvin, I do want to open the space. If there's anyone else who want to just share maybe how you're living with it, maybe how you experienced it, maybe what you're doing to overcome it. If you'd like to just use this space as an opportunity to share to help us, I'd love to hear from you.
And if it makes everyone feel comfortable, I can pause on the recording. But you will have to tell me. Okay.
Somebody say yes, please.
Okay. So I will pause on the.
And then we'll.
But before we continue, if everyone, so at the very beginning, Walter encouraged us to take a deep breath. I just feel like, at least for me, like after hearing that, because I'm actually listening to the stories, and I'm kind of like not breathing. So just a reminder for those of us on the line, just to make sure that we do take those deep breaths.
Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you for that reminder. Finding meaning in loss. And I was alluding to some of this, talking with just listening to Serena, honoring the memories, creating rituals or memorials that can help us remember those we lost, those we love, I'm in the moment, something that I do yearly. I just buy a candle and light a candle. So when I walk in the room, I can smell the aroma and it reminds me of my mom or my sister or whatnot. Something small, but it's helpful for me. It may be a vacation for you, it may be a meal, it may be a song. But what is it that you can do to create some meaning in the loss that you've had? Sharing experience, we talked about that already. And discovering a purpose, right? Finding a way of how can we turn our pain into purpose? How can we commit to something that's beyond ourselves, right? How can we begin to operate from a place of wanting to see others handle and manage things a bit better than maybe how we have, right? So when we commit ourselves to a purpose, that's as you heard me talk about earlier, that's that why, when you have a purpose, your purpose, it gets you going, it's that motivation, it's that discipline. Yet it's when motivation lack because you're so committed to that person, that purpose, discipline kicks in and it becomes habitual. Willpower becomes a part of that as well, giving yourself permission to feel, giving yourself permission to sit with that and to step away, knowing that you have to take care of you before you take care of others. Having that willpower to pause but not get stuck, right? And that's why I want to emphasize that we don't get stuck, because life is going to continue to move, and if we're back here, we got to keep moving with the times. Our attitude, can we reflect on the happy memories? Can we reflect on the positive times? Can we find a moment of gratitude for what is in the moments and experiences we've once had with our loved ones or with the way things once were, because our attitude and our perception, a lot of times is what we need to shift to just help us carry on. And lastly, I'll say, think about the legacy that you can leave, by sharing your story, by operating from a place of purpose, by mastering your willpower, all of these things, I think, helps us to find meaning in our grief, and whatever it is that we may be grieving and experiencing. So my challenge to you all is just take an assessment of where you are. Where are you on your journey? You know the truth. Identify a strategy that can work for you. And if nothing was shared here today, reach out to us and we can talk a little bit more. This is something we offer to many companies and individuals, helping them to work through their issues and their concerns and their matters. So consider adopting a coping strategy that may be helpful for you. Not everything is for everybody, and be open to reaching out. We're here to support. I'm here to support if I can help with anything, or we happy to put you in connection with someone who can be of support to you, or a resource, because we don't have to do this alone. I am extremely honored and humbled to be in this space with you and to just share this insight and this information. And I hope something was said that penetrated your heart and mind. And I thank you a ton. I'll pause there and I just want to just save some time. I don't know how we doing. Look at that. Just want to, if we have a question or two, so we can end on time. I do like to respect folks' time. I'll invite them in now. Or if you, I'm not a debating type, but if want to argue against something I said, I'll respect that too. Any questions? Or any additional thoughts?
Hi, this is Cynthia. Can I
Yeah.
say something else? Okay.
Of course, please.
First of all, Alvin, my heart goes out to you because, when I was going through my heart journey and I didn't think what my husband was going through. I really didn't, because he looked at me as the one that was always, the go-getter. And then all of a sudden, my mind, my spirit, everything changed for a little bit there until I got my balances. And then I had to depend on him, which I'm not used to doing. It was hard for him. So I'm glad to see that you are taking steps to accept how you feel, and also take on the role of taking care of yourself, because I'm still making him make appointments that he didn't do for himself when he was trying to take care of me. So that's number one. Also, losing a mom, I have Sunday mornings. That's my time with mom, because we lost our matriarch. So Sunday after church, normally we go to mama's house, pick mama's house and eat. Well, we don't have that no more. So Sunday mornings for me has become a time where I reflect, I think, I may cry. I might say, I didn't listen to you on how to cook this, so mama help me through this. Whatever helps to do that grief. And I might turn on some 1970s R&B because she loved that. And just think about her and Al Green or whatever gets me over that point. And normally I find my other siblings are doing the same thing. They're like, I didn't know anybody did that. I'm like, yeah, I do that. So yeah, but Alvin, I mean, really, it's not easy for the caregiver. It's not. It's not at all. That's it. I thank you guys because this is wonderful.
Of course. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I was just saying if anyone else had a thought or comment or question. I echo everything that said Alvin. 100%. Yeah, I'm deriving some of that energy from you, man, for myself. Very brave. Shanta.
So thank you again, everyone, for showing up, for participating. And as Walter mentioned, not everyone is a storyteller, and not everyone is willing to share or ready to share, and that's okay. However, for those of you that did share, including you, Walter, like as you mentioned, it's still helping someone else. Someone else is listening, and someone else can relate. And so even those of on the line that weren't able to step up and speak, we still, as Walter mentioned earlier, we still feel your energy, and I'm pretty sure that hopefully there were some key takeaways there. And so with that said, we'll conclude the session, but in the chat, I'll email it as well. In the chat is a link to a survey. If you could please respond to that, so that way we can know how we did and if there are any opportunities for improvement or any comments that you may have or any suggestions, because this information will be shared with the Maryland Department of Health and the Healthy Heart Learning Collaborative to help them. And if this was beneficial for you, your feedback will help us to make a case for recommendations moving forward for the Maryland Department of Health as well. So everyone, thank you. I'll give the rest of your time back to you on this Wednesday, and peace, love, and blessings to you all. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. Have a good evening, everyone.